Well, sometimes you think about, well, what am I going to speak about? Being the first day of the week, first day of the month, and the first day of the year. So you got it. So we're going to speak about a new year, although I usually don't do that every year, because sometimes we get tired maybe of not necessarily celebrating a new year, but certainly the New Year's resolutions. Some people kind of struggle with the New Year's resolutions. I was reading some of the things in the last few weeks, like the person, I think it was about a week ago, their goal was to lose 10 pounds. And at that point, they only had 15 more to lose. So it's not working too well. Now, other people also have that goal, which is a fairly lofty goal. It's a good goal to read through the Bible in the year. But about a week ago, they were trying to figure out how could you actually fulfill that when you're still in Exodus. And I think it was like reading like 10 hours a day for a week, and then maybe you'd finish it off, right? Get through the Bible in a year. So sometimes we struggle with, what's really my purpose? What's my direction? Where am I going in life? And it's not a bad idea once in a while to think about that. You may be at a place of work where people once in a while want to sit down and say, hey, where are we going as a company? Where are we going as a department? Are we fulfilling goals that we set? Are we on track? Are we on target? How are things? So once in a while, it's good maybe to find out how it is. How's things going? Maybe sometimes even in a family relationship, you maybe, I don't know if you would exactly do that on your wedding anniversary to say, I wonder how things are going here. Is there things that we can do to, make things better? But certainly on that day, maybe you want to give it a try to do something different. And maybe that's what we can do. That's certainly what we are encouraged to do when we think about a new year, a new beginning. And sometimes even with computers, right? So I think most computers are still like that. So even the smartphones, they're not that smart enough to know when they're in trouble, right? I mean, I'm not that smart to know when they're not in trouble either, but I know sometimes what you can do is just restart it, right? Just kind of shuts the whole thing down. It's called a reboot, a soft, start, whatever it would be to try to, because you see, sometimes it's running slow, or sometimes it's just not running right, like things aren't lining up and things aren't, so it happens sometimes even on the laptop computers. I'm doing work, it's kind of like things are running off the screen. Where are they? And you look and look and look and you just think, well, if I just restart it, it'll be there. But now sometimes restarting takes a few minutes, right? You got to close down all your programs, make sure everything's all set, and then restart, and then it does what it needs to do, but it comes back and it's like new. It's magic, right? How does this work? I don't know, but it seems to work sometimes. So I'm thinking maybe not about New Year's resolution, let's start something big, but maybe thinking about where we've been. And, maybe just doing a soft restart of thinking, what is this really all about? What's my life about? Am I on track? Am I on purpose? Am I trying to fulfill what I set out to fulfill, right, at the beginning of my life? I'm not talking about when you were a baby, but, maybe when you started out your marriage, or when you started out your business or your career, or started out with kids, or maybe even when you started out as a Christian. I wonder how that's going. You start as a Christian, you're excited, and there's a lot of stuff going on, and got big dreams and that type of thing, but is it not easy sometimes just to kind of fall into the routine? We just kind of do the same things, and, we get comfortable, right? It just seems just going along, and maybe we're not growing much anymore, we're not challenged much anymore, we don't really think much more about, our life in Christ. Well, and that's maybe something that Paul was trying to help the church with in Colossae. Most of the letters, he's trying to encourage them to think about where they're at and where they're going. But this is what he says in Colossians chapter 3, beginning in verse 1. Some translations actually have the word since, because in Greek the word if, since are very similar. So some say since you've been raised with Christ, or if you've been raised. Kind of, he knows they have. He's writing to Christians. I know you have. And so the if is, yeah, well, I have. Well, now what? Well, and so the thing is, before chapter 3 is chapter 2. So chapter 2, actually in verse 12, says that we have been raised with Christ when we were baptized with him, into him. We were baptized to start a new life. That's when we became a Christian. So we've been raised with Christ, raised in Christ, raised to live for Christ. We've been raised with Christ. But the rest of chapter 2 talks about, well, there's some challenges sometimes, because sometimes people come along and say, well, it's great you're in Christ, but that's not enough. There's more. You got to do extra stuff. And some of that stuff was, you got to keep law. And it wasn't necessarily just always the Old Testament law. Sometimes it's like, we got some laws you can keep. We got some stuff to add on to it. So what happened with a lot of the people is they just like, well, we just come, what we do is follow the rules. That's what we're rules people. We just follow the rules. Are you in it? Yeah, I do the rules. And he's kind of saying, being in a relationship is more than rules. Like, especially if you're going to enjoy it, especially if you're going to grow in it. Because what will rules do? I'll just keep the rules and it'll be okay, right? So we've used the analogy before at home. If you are married and you think, well, honey, what are the rules? Give me the rules. I'll follow the rules. Well, your honey probably doesn't want you just to follow rules, right? What does she want? She wants you. She wants your heart. She wants everything. Now, sometimes the opposite can be true, and some people even treat God that way. They think, well, I know that God has some expectations from me, but I just don't know what they are. Well, you're not listening, men. Does your wife ever say that to you? You're not listening, mister. Or, you're not listening, honey. Yeah, we got to listen. He's given us the rules, right? But they're not rules to keep. It's kind of like the guideline of how we would live for him. Because what does God want? He doesn't just want our following rules. He wants our heart, right? So this is what he's going to say now. You've been raised with Christ. It's not just about the rules. It's about giving Christ everything. And he's going to show us what that means, what that looks like. Because actually, we go on reading even in Colossians chapter 3. We're not going to look at that today. But he does talk about, what does a Christian person look like? What kind of thoughts are they going to have? What kind of actions are they going to have? What kind of heart are they going to have? But if we've been raised with Christ, we seek the things that are above, where Christ is seated at the right hand of God. Set your minds on things that are above and not on things of the earth. So that's really what it means to live as a Christian. To say, I'm going to be looking above, and maybe even more than that, I'm going to be looking towards the future, which is a good way to live. Because if you're only living today, you're only going to do what today requires. You're just going to say, well, if I'm going to live for today, I want to make sure I eat good. I want to make sure I'm entertained. I want to make sure I have fun. I'm going to make sure that life is good, right? Because I'm just living for today. Now, if I'm living for the future, well, now I've got to think about some other things, because decisions I make today are going to impact how it's going to be in the future. Kind of physically, financially, relationally, all that stuff comes into play of if I'm looking towards the future. But what if I'm looking to even longer term goals of like going to heaven? So if we say, if that's really what I'm working for, that's what my life is about. My life is to go to heaven. Well, what else? Well, I want to go to heaven, but while I'm here, I want to make sure that I'm pleasing the one in heaven that I'm going to go see, and that's God, the Father. So I'm going to live here with that in mind. So my goals, my plans, my purpose is all going to be centered around one day I'm going to be there, and I don't ever want to have the thought that if I got there, would I have some regrets? I get there, it's like, well, it's great to be in heaven. I don't think it would be like this, okay, because heaven can't be like this because it wouldn't be good. But you kind of get there and it's like, boy, I could have done so much more in the world. I just made it all about me. I could have served a lot more, but I was just too proud. I could have forgiven, but I was just unwilling to overlook. I could have, I should have, I regret. Now, I think we always have regrets. Nobody really lives up to their full potential. But we think about, well, if I'm thinking about there, what about here? I know sometimes there's a saying. The old saying is, boy, that guy is so heavenly minded, he's no earthly good. Right? I don't know if you've heard that one before, but I heard a preacher giving a commentary on that and said, I don't think I've ever met anybody like that. That's not a problem. Believe me, that's not our problem. Right? Sometimes we're so earthly minded, we're no heavenly good, right? Because all we're doing is thinking about here and now. But if we can find the balance to say, how do I live my life in light of eternity, then that would change a lot of things. So we're going to set our minds on the spiritual realm. Because spiritual realm, and it's difficult for us to comprehend because spiritual realm is not what we see, but spiritual realm is reality. That's where real life is. That's kind of where the real challenge is, where the real battle is, but that's also where the real victory is and where the real love is. It's in the spiritual realm. It's lived out in the physical. But we are spiritual beings living in a physical world. And then people get that backwards. They think, well, I'm a physical person trying to figure out how I can be spiritual. Well, that's not the way it is. You are already spiritual. You may not be spiritually healthy, but you're spiritual. And there's a spiritual world in which we live. And yet it's lived out in the physical realm. So this is what he's saying. Think about not just things on the earth. Think about the things that are spiritual, the things that are eternal, the things that are even in the future. And he's going to say, this is why. For you've died with Christ. And he said, well, again, when have you done that? Well, you died in Colossians chapter 2, verse 12. You died when you were buried with Christ. But now you're hidden with Christ in God. So that's where our life, we are consumed with that. It just takes over everything. And when Christ, who is your life, appears, then you will appear with him in glory. So again, what's he talking about? Looking forward to Christ is coming back. Are you ready? Christ is coming. Like, what if he came today? It's like, well, I'm not ready today. Well, you need to get ready because he might be coming back today or tomorrow, in a month or two, or he may not come back for a while. But we also know, yes, he may not come back for a while, but you may be going to see him today, right? Because some people actually die. And we know that. But most of us, and I should probably interview like people in their 90s, it's like, they probably say the same thing I do. Yeah, some people are going to die today, not going to be me, right? I'm not dying this year. Look, I'm young and healthy. Right? I mean, I could ask the teenagers all day long and say, are I not young and healthy? And they're like, no, you're old and decrepit. Like, you are on your last string. I mean, 9 lives, you're 8.5. I mean, you are finished. Like any day now. But no, not me. But we don't think that way. So what do we think? Got plenty of time? Got plenty of time to do all the things that I haven't done yet? Got plenty of time to serve the Lord and bless God's people and share my faith. I got a lot of time to do all kinds of stuff. Well, no guarantees of that. What's he saying? We're looking forward to being with Christ. So we're going to be ready when he comes. We're going to be ready when I go to meet him. So I adjust my life. I think about how is this going to impact the way I live, my priorities, the things that I say, how I invest my time, how I use my material goods. Especially if I'm reminded, I'm not here for a long time. Even if you're young, you're still not here for a long time. It seems like a long time, but the days go by. And so we think about, how am I going to live for Christ? Because I've already died with him. I've got a new life in him. So Philippians, so a couple of analogies that, I don't know, just like there's a game. There's games all weekend, right? Important games. So some people don't do so well, and some people were hoping will do well. But I was just kind of thinking, because Paul uses a sports analogy in 2 scriptures. But think about this. In Philippians 3, even when it comes to football or maybe even another sport, because that's what Paul's thinking about, sports. I mean, I don't think he watched the game every Sunday, but he's using that analogy to say, what does our Christian life look like? Brothers, I do not consider that I've made it on my own. I've not arrived. I'm not perfect. I'm not all I ought to be and should be and could be. I'm still working and I'm still growing. But one thing I do, I forget what lies behind. So I forget all the defeats I've had. I forget all the pain I've endured. Sometimes quite frankly, we just have to forget some of the victories we've had too, right? Because what do victories do? It's like, yeah, I'm all that. Yeah, try thinking that going into the next game. You're going to lose because you got overconfident. You think, well, I don't need to work hard. This is going to be an easy win, right? Not all the time. So actually, Paul says in 1 Corinthians chapter 10, he who thinks he stands, you think you're all that, you think you're all strong. He who thinks he stands, be careful, take heed, be aware, because you're going to fall. Kind of like what the proverb says, pride comes before the fall. Got to be careful. But I can leave that behind. Now what do? I strain forward to what lies ahead. I press on toward the goal for the prize of the upward call of God in Christ Jesus. So what's he saying? I'm going to work hard. You want to know what that means? Let's talk about football. It means it's going to get painful. It's not going to be easy. This is what he's saying. I strain. I work. The idea is, the Greek is almost like the agony. I agonize. I go through suffering so that I can win. And it's not a game, but this is what they do in football. They go through it to get the touchdown. The more touchdowns you get, the more chances you have of winning, right? So this is why we spend all the time training and thinking and planning and scheming and doing all these things so that we can win one game. And you probably know I'm not a sports fan. I don't watch sports. I don't follow sports. Know very little about sports. So you got to take this with a grain of salt, because I know I'm going to offend some people right now. Winning a game is really not a big deal in the grand scheme of life. Like, I know. You're thinking, like, if the Lions win today, it'll be like a miracle. No, it'll be like magic. It'll be, best thing ever. Wrong. There's a lot better. Like, you know what I mean? It's not the end of the world. It's just the end of the season. It's not the end. Like, there's still next season. But, the things that we say, that was so important. But what is important? That's what we're wondering. What is important? That's what we're talking about. Looking forward. He's saying, I strain, I work, I press on because I want to win the prize. I want to win the game. I want to win the trophy. I want to win the position. And what's he talking about? Just being in heaven. I want to live my life so I can go to heaven. I want to win my life so I can go to heaven with no regrets. Right? I mean, you're going to get to heaven by the grace of God if you're following Jesus, but you want to get there because you have been faithful and you've been a follower. So Paul uses another analogy. I know it gets even more bloody now, right? In boxing, I fought the good fight. I finished the race. I've kept the faith. Henceforth, there is laid up for me the crown of righteousness, which the Lord, the righteous judge, will award to me on that day. And not only to me, but to all who have loved his appearing. So the idea is, I am just thinking about the victory. I'm thinking about the finish. I'm thinking about the winner's circle. I'm thinking about being there in heaven. So what's that going to do? It changes the way I live today. Even if you're not in the middle of the battle today, you got to get ready for it. So you're just building your faith. You're getting stronger. You're trying to be the person that God's called you to be. You do what you can do to be God's person. Because you want to win. Now, it's not saying it's not saying I want to be ahead of you or better than you. I just want to be the best I can be. Well, God's called me to be. Because quite frankly, we all don't play the same positions anyway on the football field, right? You got different people, different positions. We have different gifts and talents and abilities. We just want to be the best we can be for God So what we're saying is we think about the end, the goal, where we want to get to, and then we can start figuring out how am I going to get there. So that's the idea of us thinking and planning and dreaming about God's best for us. So this is what Jesus said. I've glorified, praying to the Father, this is before he went to the cross. I glorified you, my Father in heaven, on earth, having accomplished the work you gave me to do. So all he's saying is, I've worked according to what you've given me, the plan. I've been faithful. I've followed you all the way. I've listened to your voice. I've done the work. It's finished. I've done it. And now he's saying, I'm going to die and going to go back to heaven. But again, even the death we know of Jesus was very painful. Look what it says in Acts chapter 13, where it speaks about King David in the Old Testament. It's just kind of looking back on his life and just reminding us that, yes, David died and he was never resurrected, but Jesus, the greater king, has been raised from the dead and glorified to the Father in heaven. But look what it says about David, though. For David, after he had served the purpose of God in his own generation, he died. Well, when did he die? He died when he had served the purpose of God. He did what he could. And you know David, a lot of mistakes, a lot of failures, a lot of struggles. But he did what he could in serving God when that was fulfilled. I mean, it almost sounds like David could say at the end of his life, I'm ready to die. I've done what I could do. Serving the purpose of God in his generation. Just think about that. Is that you? Could you say that? I have served the purpose of God in my generation. Whatever that purpose for you that God has, you got to figure that out. What is God's purpose for me in my life? But I don't want to go until that's done. And I don't want to be here forever. So I better start thinking about what's God's purpose for my life so I can get about doing it. So that's kind of the whole idea of this. We're talking about the reboot on the computer. So maybe just a couple of things that may help us when we think about that. A quote from Francis Chan. He said, our greatest fear should not be of failure, but of succeeding at things in life that don't matter. So you think about that. Succeeding at things in life that don't matter. I mean, that may define some of us. Well, I've succeeded in the business world. And does it matter in the grand scheme of things? No, it doesn't. I hate to say it. No, it doesn't. You know, I've succeeded in the athletic field. No, it's really not that big of a deal. It doesn't really matter. There's things that are more important than that. I mean, I'm happy for you if you're in that situation. But sometimes you can even succeed in things that are detrimental. They can be detrimental. They're not always detrimental. But think about this. People that have succeeded very highly in business. Well, I know they used to follow Jesus and go to church. Where are they now? Now, some of them are still in the church. That's the whole thing. It's not a blanket statement that just because you're successful, you get too caught up in the things of the world. Or that you are, a very well-known person. Or you have a lot of power or influence. You have a lot of knowledge. People look up to you. They think you're the best. Again, that can go to your head pretty quickly, and you lose your sense of balance. You get way out of balance. And you actually believe what the sinners and the saints are saying about you. Yeah, you're really all that. Yeah, I guess I am. And God's like, no, not really. Without me, you're nothing. See, it's all in balance. Succeeding at things that matter should be what is most important to us. We fail to be our best because we settle for things that are good. We get caught up in a lot of good things, but they're not necessarily the best things. So again, we have to figure that out on our own. So just a couple things for us that maybe aren't so good with the keyboard, and that's certainly me to a large extent. This is the keyboard. So here's your keyboard lesson really quick. And I'm sure the young people know this well, but I was just wondering if there's some spiritual applications to some of the keyboard. So the control button is in the, don't go home and like, mine's not on the bottom left, because sometimes they are in different places. But anyway, the control button enables other keys to change function. So you think, well, that's what's on the keyboard, but what about life? Like, what's the control of my life? Who's in control of my life? Who is the one that, it's not like just pushing a button, but enables other things in my life to change function, to change what the purpose is, to change how this is going to work, to change the program, right? So this is God. God is the one who can change me, to make me act in a different way than I used to act. Because sometimes we think, I just act in this one way. But when you have somebody pushing the control button, they can change things. And you can become a different person if you give control to God. So that's the control function on the keyboard. But beside it is the Alt. So we're going to eventually get to the Control, Alt, Delete, but not really. So this is the alternate, which means modifies the key, the working ability. So again, it's kind of very similar to Control, but I had to come up with something a little different. But it modifies the working ability. It gives things a different perspective. So it means I have to allow things to be different, because that's what alternate means, right? It's not this one thing, it's the other thing, alternate. So we have to be a little flexible. And again, sometimes if you're young, you think, well, I'm not that flexible. Just wait till you get older, right? When you get older, you're really super not flexible at all. I'm not talking physically, I know, you can tell that. But just in life itself, it's like we get in our mold, we get in our routine, we get in our rut, and then we get in our grave. But it's all just getting deeper and deeper and deeper. And it's just hard to get out, right? But we have to say, God, you can work in my life. Maybe there's things that God still wants to change. He's got a new idea, a new plan, a new way for us, to live. He's got a new ministry, a new opportunity. A lot of times, when we go through life, if you've got kids, maybe one day the kids are going to be moved out. And maybe you've got a job. One day you're going to be retired, right? One day you're kind of struggling with finances earlier on. Maybe later on, you're financially stable. So there's things that change in our life. So we got to be prepared to allow God to work in that. And then there's delete. And so I use this a lot on my computer, but I use this a lot in my life too, right? So there's a lot of stuff that you just do wrong. It just comes out wrong. It just doesn't work the way you think it's going to work. So you got to delete, 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 which just means take it away, go back on it, remove it. And the idea, it's so cool today with computers. As old people, it's just kind of like we want to bring one of those old manual typewriters and show the kids and say, this is how we wrote term papers, right? Do you remember that? Who remembers that? You'd write a term paper and it's like, oh yeah, I forgot that. It's not like I forgot a word. It's like I forgot a whole paragraph. How do you put that in there now? On the old, yeah, things change though. Now you can delete things and change things and move things. So life seems to be getting a little easier, but what about living day by day in life itself, not just working on the computer? The backspace goes back and corrects past problems. So sometimes you do have to go back in life. Sometimes you have to go back to correct something. Sometimes it's in a relationship, or maybe it's something that you've done or said. You have to go back and try to correct things that have happened in the past. And if you do that, it gives you a lot more strength to go forward, right? So you'll be able to put the past behind you because you've dealt with it, you've changed it, you've made the corrections that you're able to do. Shift, the shift key, moves you up to the higher position. So I know I made that up. But, so on the keys, there's usually, with the upper and lower case keys, but then some of them also allow you to go to the higher program. I see Phil up there. He's probably just, with his head, like, this is ridiculous. Anyway, he knows nothing about computers or even a keyboard. So escape, right? So if you're doing something, you hit escape, it cancels or closes all the windows, or cancels a process, kind of gets you out of what you're into. And that's what we need to sometimes to do, right? To escape. Things happen in our life where we just need to get out of it. And you need to get out of it quickly sometimes. You ever done that? You're kind of in a trial, a temptation, there's a difficulty, and it's kind of like, oh, well, Yeah, we can do that later. We'll get out later. I'm sure there's plenty of time. Yeah, we're just kind of getting deeper and deeper into this thing, but, let's just wait and see how it plays out, because maybe it'll get better, and it won't. But, you're just thinking, it's going to be fine. It's like, no, sometimes you just hit the escape button and you're out, right? To say, this is not where I need to be, because this is a place of severe temptation, a place of sin, a place of immorality, a place of bad thinking. I just need to escape this. And so hit the button to escape. And then there's the function button. The function modifies and controls light and sound. So a lot of times that does the screen, if it's too bright or too dim, or the sound and all that stuff. So it adjusts things that are coming in and out of our life. I mean, how many people need a new way of looking at things? They need a little bit more light in their life, right? Or they need a little more sound. You need to be hearing something that somebody's saying, or sometimes even God is saying something. It's like, yeah, turn up the sound. You need to be listening. Don't try to ignore it. Don't put that into the background. Make sure that you're paying attention. Make sure you can see and that you can hear well. So this is the win key, except in Canada, I think they say it's wink, eh? I'm just kidding. They don't. It's still called it's really for Windows, but I don't think it's for Windows. It's just, there's two of them on there, which means you get the win-win. And so isn't that what we all want? That's what life's about, is that we can succeed and do our best. So that's completely not really what the win key is, but for me, it's a win, okay? And then the last one is the home key, which kind of takes you back. But again, what's life all about? Like, for us, it's about going home. And I'm not talking about after lunch. I'm saying, God's got a home for us. Like Jesus said, I'm going to go and prepare a place. There's going to be a room for you. There's going to be a building. Some translations say mansions. He's building something. He's preparing something for us, that there's going to be a place, a home, where we can reside in heaven forever. And so that is the gospel according to the keyboard. I don't know. You can let me know how poorly that went. But this is what life's about, of saying, how can I live to my potential? Sometimes I do need a reboot. I just need the Control-Alt-Delete to say, I need to start afresh. I need a new look on things. So 2 Corinthians chapter 5 and verse 17, therefore, if anyone is in Christ, he is a new creation. The old has passed away, and behold, the new has come. This is God's plan, that we would consider the direction, consider the purpose, consider how we're living, what modifications, changes. Sometimes it's a complete it is a complete U-Haul too. Sometimes you got to pack everything up, move it. But overhaul, right, where just everything is kind of out of sync just a little bit, and we just need to get a perspective of godly wisdom, of living for Christ, of having a change of mind, change of heart. That's what leads to change of action, change of words, change of life. And ultimately, we also talk about the change of destiny, which is what we talk about when we talk about this idea of going home. So it's why Jesus came, so that we could have a home in heaven. And we have a great opportunity while we're here on this earth to live a godly life, even in a world that has a lot of chaos, a lot of challenges, and a lot of temptations. But we live here for God's glory, so that we can go to heaven and enjoy God's glory. If we can encourage you today in your Christian walk, if today you want to be baptized into Christ, to start that new life all over, leave the past behind, press on to something much bigger and greater than you've ever known. It's actually unbelievable that God would make you a son or a daughter. You can be his child, and he'll continue to love you and to bless you and to strengthen you, and he's got a home for you. If we can encourage you, let's stand. We'll sing this song. Let us know how we can be a blessing.